All right, good morning and welcome to this week's edition of NCompass Live. I am your host, Krista Porter, here at the Nebraska Library Commission. NCompass Live is the Commission's weekly webinar series where we cover a variety of topics that may be of interest to libraries. We broadcast the show live every Wednesday morning at 10 a.m. Central Time. But if you're unable to join us on Wednesdays, that's fine. We do record the show as we are doing today, and it will be posted to our NCompass Live archive page for you to watch later at your convenience. And I'll show you at the end of today's show where you can access all of those show recordings. Both the live show and the recordings are free and open to anyone to watch. So please spread the word, share with anyone, any of your colleagues whom you think might be interested in any of the topics we have on NCompass Live. For any of you who are here who are not from Nebraska, the Nebraska Library Commission is the state agency for libraries, so similar to your whatever state library. So we provide training and resources and databases and grants and consulting to all types of libraries in the state. So we have shows on NCompass Live for all types of libraries. Public, academic, K-12, corrections, museums, historical societies, blah, blah, blah. Really, our only criteria is that it's something to do with libraries, something cool libraries are doing. We bring in guest speakers from all across Nebraska and across the country. We have Nebraska Library Commission staff that sometimes do presentations about services and programs and things we're doing here through the commission. And today we have a guest speaker with us. Emily Nimsakont. Good morning, Emily.
Hello, how are you?
And she's had many different types of jobs throughout her library career, one of them being here at the Library Commission. She worked here years ago. But currently she's a digital librarian, and she's going to talk to us about how what's it like to be a librarian at a corporate library, which some of us maybe have done, some have not. Should be interesting. So this is a presentation that Emily did at our state library conference, correct, right, in October? Yeah, Nebraska Library Association has an annual conference, and she presented there. And it was a very good session, I heard, so decided to have her come on NCompass Live and share more about it. So so I hand it over to you, Emily. Tell us all about what it's like being a corporate librarian.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Krista. Yeah, it's weird being a guest speaker on NCompass Live when I previously did it as Library Commission staff several times, but it's good to be back, kind of going back to my roots here. Yeah, so I gave this presentation, as Krista said, at the NLA conference in October, and I'm glad to be invited to have this chance to give it to a wider audience. I titled it To Librarianship and Beyond because, you know, it's kind of weird thinking about my current job. You know, my title is still librarian. I feel like I am very much still a librarian, but kind of in a different way than some of my more traditional library roles. And so I feel like I'm kind of stretching the definition of what I do as a librarian. So I'll talk about that today. Here is kind of my agenda for what I'm going to cover over the next 45 minutes to an hour or so. I'll tell you a little bit about me and my career path and, you know, how I got from the Nebraska Library Commission to my current corporate job. It's been kind of a long and winding road. I'll talk in general terms about what does a corporate librarian do. Tailored, of course, to my experience. I'm not gonna, you know, I'm gonna probably give this disclaimer several times over the course of this presentation, but I'm basing this on my personal experience.
Of course.
You know, there's no one universal corporate librarian experience, just like there's no one universal public librarian or academic librarian experience. So, you know, your mileage may vary. I will talk a little bit about my opinions on how corporate librarianship compares to traditional library work, the differences between what I'm doing now and what I used to do in more traditional roles. And as I said, I've given the disclaimer of your mileage may vary several times, but the next section will be specifically about that, what I like about my specific job. So not just the field of corporate librarianship in general, but my company, what I do, why I'm really happy where I am right now. And then I'll kind of zoom back out to bigger picture and give some tips about how do you become a corporate librarian, if that might be something that you're interested throughout some point in your career. So, as I said, I'll start with about me. Hello. As Krista said, my name is Emily Nimsakont, and I started my career at the Nebraska Library Commission. Currently, my position is digital librarian at a software company called Posit. I've been there since February of 2022, so coming up on my 3rd anniversary. Yeah, which time flies. I can't believe that. It is a data science software company. If anybody has dabbled in data science at all, if you may know the RStudio suite of tools, that is made by Posit. We used to be called RStudio as a company name, and about a year after I started, we rebranded under the Posit name, which was an interesting experience. I definitely never experienced a rebrand at any of my current other jobs before.
Yeah. That was one thing I was curious about, is what exactly does this company do?
Yeah, we are a data science software company, so make software to help people analyze large data sets and present their results through graphics and things like that. We are a remote first company, so we have a home office in Boston, but I've heard some of the higher ups say that really they think of it as more like a co-working space that people can come to if they want to. Nobody is required to be in the office. You know, we have, I think, one staff member who's there for mail and things like that, and the CEO comes in fairly frequently, but the vast majority of our workforce is remote, working from home, including me, obviously. I'm working from Nebraska for a company that's based in Boston.
Yeah, so they're like all over the country then?
All over the country and even all over the world. I have colleagues in Australia and Brazil and Switzerland, I think. So yeah, we are truly a global company.
Neat. Okay, cool.
Yeah. So let me talk a little bit about how did I get here. As Krista and I have referenced, I did work at the Nebraska Library Commission. That was my very first job after library school. So I got my master's degree in library science in 2008 and was lucky enough to find a job in my area that I wanted to focus on, which was cataloging, without having to move geographically, which I know is not the case for everybody when they finish library school. But I was the cataloging librarian at the Nebraska Library Commission for, gosh, I think it was like 7 years. It was a while. Yeah. It seems like yesterday and yet like a lifetime ago. So I cataloged their collection, a lot of original cataloging of state government documents in particular. We still are a repository for state agencies. They have to submit a copy of, you know, their reports. And of course, since it's Nebraska based, these are things that other libraries aren't having. So a lot of original cataloging. And I also did training on cataloging and metadata topics, which is kind of where I discovered my love of training and presenting. So that's kind of worked its way back into my career several times. In 2015, I think, I left the commission to go to the Schmid Law Library at the University of Nebraska College of Law. And I was their head of tech services, head of cataloging and resource management, I think was my official title, but basically head of the tech services department. And so this gave me a chance to develop some skills that I hadn't developed at the commission. You know, I was a supervisor for the first time, less day-to-day cataloging and more like workflow coordination and things like that, thinking of the tech service department as a whole rather than a just being a cataloger, making sure the records were correct. And then, as life often does, life was definitely thrown a complete wrench. My husband is in the Army, and he got assigned to move to what was then Fort Bragg, now Fort Liberty in North Carolina. And so I left the law college job when we moved halfway across the country, which of course kind of threw my career into a little bit of limbo for a while. And this is where, you know, I'll say later on that one of my tips for finding jobs in general, and especially in corporate areas, is to just network like crazy. You never know when somebody you know is going to be in a position to help you out. A colleague who I had never met in person, but had interacted with online and presented a couple of webinars with for the American Association of Law Librarians. She was a law librarian at a law firm based in California, and I was obviously an academic law librarian. And so about the time that I was moving to North Carolina, she was leaving her law firm job to go to another tech company named Singularity University. And they basically, their main mission was educating leaders in the tech industry about sort of sustainable and progressive, environmentally friendly, social justice friendly things they could be doing in their tech company. So she was a librarian for them and was in the position to hire contractors to kind of help with their metadata for their marketing assets, things like that. So she hired me as a contractor, and that's what I did for 9 months while we were in North Carolina. And there was also obviously a remote position, so that was my first taste of working from home, and I really liked it. I think if I can at all help it, I'm not going to go back to working in an office. And so, but it was, a temporary contract position, so I was kind of still keeping my feelers out for other things. And in 2019, I was hired for another remote position as the cataloging and metadata trainer for Amigos Library Services, which you may have heard of. They're a consortium. They do things like group purchasing for libraries, continuing education, which is where I fell in. Again, it was a remote position. Amigos is based in both Dallas and St. Louis, but they do have many remote employees. So I did work for them for 2.5 years, I think, as a trainer.
Mm-hmm.
And then the same colleague who I worked with at Singularity and had formerly interacted with as a law librarian, she moved on to Posit, or our studio as it was known then, and again was in a situation where she was promoted to kind of a manager role, was able to hire people under her, and so she recruited me for the digital librarian job at Posit. I got a sense from her that it was a really nice place to work, a good supportive company. So I went through the interview process and started my job there, as I said, in February of 2022. So that is my career in a nutshell.
Yeah, it's a lot. Yeah, it's sometimes it's who you know and where who you've connected with. Yeah.
Yeah, like I think honestly, this colleague that I worked with, it may have been an NCompass Live presentation I did when I was at the commission, where she first saw me as a presenter and then asked me to do webinars with her when I was a law librarian, because she was a law librarian. So yeah, you never know where things are going to lead.
Nice.
All right, so the next section is what I've titled, "What does a corporate librarian do?" More specifically, what do I do as a corporate librarian? Again, I'm not pretending that this carries across the board. And originally, I was going to title this section like a day in the life of a corporate librarian or something like that. And I thought about it some more, and I realized that I don't have a lot of 2 days that are the same. I feel like it would be really hard to present an average, typical day in the life for what I do. So
I think
instead,
we
I
all
decided.
have that. I think that's common across everyone's jobs, I guess.
Yeah, I think most librarians in general have kind of the other duties as assigned. And even if you think you are coming into a certain plan, something could happen to throw a wrench in what you're planning to do on a certain day.
Every day.
So instead of doing a day in the life, I decided to kind of do a snapshot of some projects that I have done or that I'm currently working on, because as I will touch on later in the kind of compare and contrast section, and I feel like this is a more project-based job than I've had in a lot of more traditional libraries. And so I chose to highlight a few projects that I have been involved with or am involved with now. The first main project, one of the things that I was initially hired to do was to implement a new intranet platform for the employees to, document their projects, introduce, the members of the team, things like that. When I was first hired and people would ask me what my job was, I described it as kind of, Posit was a small company made up primarily of computer scientists and programmers and data scientists who would just kind of do their job and get in the nitty-gritty of computer engineering and not really think about the information byproducts they were creating. And that was fine when there were like under 100 of them, but at the time I was hired, it was fairly rapidly upscaling to be maybe 300, 350 employees. So yeah, they needed somebody to kind of be on the outside, be infrastructure, and be like, okay, you need to organize your information so you can actually find the darn things. So I was not involved with the process to select the software. We ended up going with Confluence as our internet software, and that happened before I came on board. But I did create documentation for how we specifically are going to use it at Posit, including written documentation and short little video clips in case people are more visual learners, and also provided training at the point of launch. So we did a couple of company-wide webinars. I held open office hours if people could drop in and ask questions. We just really wanted to make sure that everybody was comfortable with the change and knew what they were doing and felt confident using Confluence. So that was kind of a project that had a neat end date when a couple months after I came on board. I guess this is probably the one thing that's not so much a project and more as a process. I'm also responsible for what I call the care and feeding of the internet. Again, I'm not a data scientist. I'm not a programmer who's making our software. My job is to kind of take a step back from all of that. I'm not in sales. I'm not customer facing, but I have the expertise and the time to look at our use of information overall. And I've done things like implement a maintenance lifecycle where we have a plugin for the software that tells us when pages haven't been updated in a year or haven't been even viewed in a year. If there's content hanging out there that people aren't even looking at, then you can probably dump it and clean up the search results so people can find what they're looking for. Yeah. And I've done this through interviews with space owners. Confluence is divided into subsections called spaces, and we've assigned them to each department basically. And so once a quarter, I have a one-on-one with the designated representative of that space or that department, and I kind of point out things to them about who's viewing their pages, are they actually getting viewed, are they stale, things like that. And so it's a lot of kind of relationship building and getting the people to the point where they will trust me, where I say, I have an information organization background, you could probably improve your organization by doing this. I also have done some usability testing, mainly through user surveys, asking people, how often do they use the internet? Do they, search for content, or do they browse for it in the page tree? Things like that. And then I've actually used the feedback from that usability testing to do things like creating a company hub, kind of the homepage for the internet, where I've identified what the most popular pages are, and can highlight those to make them easier for people to find. So another project that I worked on is what's called the business glossary for Posit, and basically it's just a very Posit specific dictionary, making sure that as business talk can be kind of jargony, and the salespeople might be using terms that other people don't know, or the software engineers are using very technical terms. And so based on, again, stakeholder interviews, talking to people and what terms they find important, doing a content analysis of the internet to see what terms are used and if any of them are defined anywhere, I have brought them together into the Posit business glossary. One thing I plan to do that I haven't done yet is another sort of usability testing with card sorting, where to make these browse by categories. This is kind of the default ones that I created, but I'd like to know if people think that we need new categories, or maybe products and services isn't the best name, we need to call it something else. So I plan to kind of get people's input on which terms belong in which categories. And then I've actually been able to update this one a little bit since I gave the presentation in October at the NLA conference. Back then I talked about this as a project that was kind of on the horizon for me. I'm actually in the thick of it now. We are trying to kind of create a knowledge graph of various assets that we have at Posit and how they interrelate to each other, and how we know who is responsible for, say, pieces of software, for example, who to talk to if something goes wrong. And so this is just kind of a screenshot of, this is based off of Jira software, which is kind of a project management, service management software. And then, so I can enter all the information in basically like a catalog record about each asset, but then I like that it also generates these knowledge graphs, so we can see if we're looking at the piece of software Salesforce, it is owned by sales operations, and then we can see all the other things that they own as well. And you can see that there's an integration between Salesforce and another piece of software called NetSuite, and that's owned by finance. So if there's any problem with this breakdown, then finance and the sales team know that they can go talk to each other in order to figure things out. So it's just kind of a map, a graph of how different assets at Posit relate to each other.
Yeah, having that kind of mapping is really important to some people who are, visual learners and just visual people that understand things that way, and to see the connections. Yeah.
100%. Yeah.
Very clear.
All right. Do you have any questions that have come in so far or anything?
Oh, good question. Yeah, I don't see anything not yet. Yeah, if anybody does have any questions, yeah, type it into the questions section of your GoToWebinar interface. I've got that up here. I'm monitoring that.
Cool.
If you want to know anything more about anything that Emily's talking about, or
yeah, you can of course wait to the end, but I don't mind stopping too.
Yeah, type it in whenever you get a chance, whenever you think of something. I don't see anything right now, but I will
Cool.
keep my eye on it and let you know. Yeah.
Then I will keep rolling. So in that section, I sort of spent some time thinking about comparing to previous more traditional library roles that I've been in. How would I say corporate librarianship compares? And I put the scale on and kind of continued that graphic theme throughout the next few slides, because really I wanted to try and present the kind of the bare facts of how it's different without editorializing a lot about the pros and cons. I will, as we go along, mention what I like, and obviously I've said before that I'm generally pretty happy here, so I can fall on the positive side of the scale most of the time, but I wanted to present it in a way where you can kind of think objectively about it, and if I say something that really works for me, but you're like, oh no, that's a deal breaker for me, then maybe this type of job is not for you.
Yeah, everyone's gonna have a different feeling about it. Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
Like for me, I when I was in library school, I learned very quickly, and because of you were a cataloger, that I will never be a cataloger. It is just not something that I was comfortable with or enjoy. Not I wasn't comfortable with, that I enjoyed. That's what it been.
Yeah, so and that is totally valid to think about what you enjoy and what you don't. And yeah, like I have I'm very introverted. Cataloging works for me. I do not enjoy being on a reference desk where there's a different question every 5 minutes. So yeah, we all have to know our strengths and what we enjoy and what we don't.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I would say the first one, kind of the neutral statement, is that you have an increased chance of being a team of one. So I am the only librarian currently at Posit. My colleague who recruited me for the role, she was a librarian too. She has an MLS degree. She did leave for another job about a year after I started, and they did not backfill her position. So I am the only librarian now. And I'm kind of hierarchically, I'm in the information operations department, which includes IT, security, and something called business automation. So I'm kind of in the mix with other teammates, but really I'm the only one who does exactly what I do. And so kind of the two ways of looking at this on the scale that I point out, no one else does what you do, which can be kind of isolating. Sometimes, I definitely, it's less so now, but when I first started, I've talked to people who have worked in corporate jobs a lot, don't really get what librarians do necessarily, but I'm feeling more ingrained as I've been here for almost 3 years. But, go ahead.
Yeah, no, we do have a question. Yeah, was there this librarian position there before? Someone wants to know, was it already, or did they create it for you? Did this person, did they already have a librarian position in the?
They did have a librarian position. Who was my boss when she recruited me, she was digital librarian and information architect, I think was her title. And then the company kind of went through a reorg where this whole information operations department was created. And originally they conceived for a whole team of what they called enterprise information management. And so my colleague got promoted to manager of enterprise information management. And then my position was a digital librarian. It was kind of a reimagined version of what she had previously been doing. So yes, there was one librarian position, and I came on board as kind of part of a upscaling of librarian function. And then because of, budget cuts and things like that, it's kind of re-downskilled for me being the only librarian.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Yeah, so it can be kind of isolating if no one else does what you do, but The positive spin that I have found exists is that I bring unique skills to the table. It may take a few extra steps to explain what a librarian does, what somebody who organizes information does, but on the plus side, sometimes I will break out with something that's just completely common sense to me, or something about, well, we need control vocabularies for this or something, and it just blows people's mind because they just don't think that way. And so you can come up looking really good sometimes. Speaking of control vocabularies, one thing that I would say, especially in the cataloging realm, you rely less on established standards. There's no Dewey Decimal classification, Library of Congress, there's no RDA or AACR2 for cataloging rules, which means you have to make a lot of decisions. So like building the business glossary, as I said, I had to make decisions about which categories to put things in because there was no established standard I could go check on. And so, if you think you're the type of person who would get decision fatigue in that situation, maybe it's not for you. But I actually really enjoy it because I feel like I get to be more creative instead of going back and saying, well, what did Melville Dewey call this, hundreds of years ago? I can be like, what do my current colleagues call this, and how can we document that so that they get to find the information that they need? I thought for a while about how to describe this, and I think this sums it up pretty well. You have, at least in my role, you have colleagues instead of patrons. As I've said before, I am not customer facing at all. Some corporate librarians, probably could be in a situation where you are, answering support questions or organizing a customer facing website. That's not me. My patrons basically are my colleagues, my fellow employees. And so depending on how you feel about things like that, the plus side is you get to build relationships. You're not just seeing somebody in a one-off reference desk situation. You get to talk to these colleagues multiple times. As I said, a lot of my projects like the intranet and the business glossary, I talked to people who would be involved in using it and really figured out how to make it work for them. If you are the person who prefers those one-off reference desk interactions, then maybe maintaining relationships is not your cup of tea. So just something to think about if you're considering a position like this. And as I referred to before, the work is more project-based. Coming from a traditional cataloging background, I kind of got used to process-based positions where, there's always a backlog of books in the corner that you have to catalog and you move those book carts across. So, and again, this is kind of a, what suits you best. I have been pleasantly surprised to find that I like a project-based job where I can say, okay, I'm working on the intranet now, that's completed. Let's move on to the business glossary, because I find it interesting that I always get to do something new. If you are not the type of person who likes that, perhaps you'll see it as you always have to do something new, and just when you get comfortable with something, you have to move on to something else. And maybe you'd like a process-based job. So, again, you know what you enjoy, and this works for me, but maybe it's not for you. All right, so the next section, again, I call it Your Mileage May Vary. We're kind of zooming in to the very nitty gritty of my specific job at my specific company. These are things that I realize do not necessarily apply across the board, but they're things that I have encountered at my company that I really didn't think about before and have been pleasantly surprised to find that they work for me. One of the things is that Posit is what's called a public benefit corporation and a certified B corporation. So I can't remember if I think on the slide I put Posit PBC as my company name. The PBC stands for Public Benefit Corporations. And basically what a B Corp does is that in order to be certified as a B Corp, you have to demonstrate that you are thinking about things like environmental concerns, social justice concerns. You have to achieve a certain score on their, I think they do a yearly survey. So, they're looking out for good in the world as opposed to just making a profit. And that you can, to be a B Corp, you need to be a public benefit corporation, which is basically a corporate governance structure. So when companies incorporate, usually their articles of incorporation state that shareholders who make a profit from the company have to be their highest concern. I think kind of outside looking in, my impression of, some corporations is like, boy, those CEOs are supposed to be evil. They're just thinking about profit, but like literally that's what they have to do under their corporate governance structure.
That's what the rules say. Yeah.
So a public benefit corporation, on the other hand, can think about all stakeholders, including the individual employees. Like paying their employees well can be a priority, or things like social and environmental impact. And so they can consider things other than making money for their shareholders. And I've really enjoyed working for a company that has that point of view.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I really like about my particular job, as I said, Posit is a remote first company. There is really no headquarters that people are even moderately expected to be in. You can come to the Boston headquarters if you want to, but we are scattered literally across the world. And because of that, I feel like the work is pretty asynchronous. There's no sense of you have to be logged on from 8 to 5 in whatever your time zone is. People are really used to, doing their part of work on a project, either sending an email or sending a Slack message or updating the project management board to say, this is what I've done. Now you do your part when you're awake in your part of the world. And so I think that works really well for reducing stress.
Mm-hmm.
And in general, the true flexibility part, I feel, not everybody, just because it's remote work, doesn't necessarily mean it's truly flexible, but Posit's particular culture definitely promotes work-life balance. We have unlimited paid time off, and I know at some companies, I feel like that's kind of a trap because nobody knows, everybody feels like there's this made-up target for what you're supposed to take and what's the right amount to take, but Posit actually puts their money where their mouth is. You're supposed to feel like you can take time off whenever you need it, and you don't need to log a couple of hours off to take your kid to a dentist appointment. They know that as long as you're getting the work done, the actual hours you work are, up to you to determine, basically. All right, so now that was the zoomed in micro level of my particular job. Let's go back up to kind of a higher level, and I'll kind of give you some tips and tricks for things to think about if you think you might want to be a corporate librarian. I would definitely say cast a wide net in your job search. Don't just stick to library-specific jobs. LinkedIn has had a surprising number. I kind of keep my eye out for similar jobs. I'm not looking to leave anytime soon, but I just kind of always like to see what's out there. And there are a decent number of jobs on LinkedIn for this type of work. I do also recommend the website I Need a Library Job, or INALJ.com. They have
them online.
Yeah, I mean, I like that they cast kind of a comprehensive net. They have traditional library work, but also lots of other information-related jobs that may not necessarily occur to you.
Yeah, and that's something, it just made me think of when you said, look for things on LinkedIn and things that are not, don't just say librarian. It's also good to keep an eye on how are these jobs being described now? Like over 100%. Time, when I looked at it, if I looked at it 5 years ago to now, it looks like it's the same work, but they're calling it something different, or you're describing it a little differently, and just keep your eyes on, how certain positions are being promoted and described. So when you are looking, if you are actually actively looking,
yeah,
oh, they're calling it this now. I should be looking for that kind of, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, just kind of keep your finger on the pulse of what people are looking for. Like I say, especially with like a cataloging type background, a lot of, computer sciencey type jobs, they understand the concept of metadata, but they wouldn't understand cataloging. But if you're a cataloger, you know how to do metadata. So
it's the same thing. It's okay. I got
it. Exactly. There's some joke that metadata is cataloging done by men, but I won't get into that. So yeah, that actually segues nicely into my next slide. Know what job titles to look for. Don't pigeonhole yourself. Just think that it has to be called librarian, because a lot of times, even if what these corporate hiring managers want is a librarian, they may call it something else. Information architect, taxonomist, content strategist. This is just a drop in the bucket. Another thing that INALJ actually has is a whole sidebar with alternative terms that you might see. So yeah, definitely not just for the jobs itself, but for the terminology and things to search for. I find that to be a really useful website.
Yeah.
But if you were paying attention to my story of my career, I didn't get my job through LinkedIn or INALJ, so I feel like a little bit of an imposter telling you things like that. As I said, I think growing your network is a really important thing to do. So if you do things like attend NLA or other conferences, your regional library conference, I got into the corporate librarian area because of somebody I knew when I was in a more traditional law librarian role. So you never know who's going to pay off when, and who you might be able to help later too. It should be a reciprocal thing, but networking can definitely come into play. And I wanted to share one resource for these kinds of less traditional information organizing jobs. It's called the sensemakersclub.com. It's run by information architect Abby Covert, who is kind of one of my professional idols. And I like that she uses the word sense maker to kind of uncover librarians, information architects, UI designers, things like that. We're just trying to make sense of information and of messes. This is a paid professional development thing. I do a monthly subscription. But once you join, there are discussion groups that happen almost every day of the month. So, you could be talking to people who do what you do every day if you want to. Like I have found some like-minded folks in the independent sense makers. Those are people who are, teams of one or either consultants kind of on their own. And so that's really where I feel like I'm growing from a traditional librarian to a sense maker, so to speak, and growing my network in new directions. And I think that is it for my main spiel. Does anyone have any questions?
Yeah, let's see. Yeah, it's awesome. So yeah, if you have any questions, anything you want to know more about, anything you want clarification on, or anything, if you all are in corporate jobs and you want to share what you do, possibly type into the questions section of your GoToWebinar interface. We do have a couple of questions. Yes, definitely. Somebody has a question about job security. Is this something that is definitely, is this something you have a sense of job security, working for the state library or a university seems a pretty secure job, generally speaking. But when you get into the private sector, things can be a little more nebulous sometimes. Companies, go belly up or whatever. How do you have any of that kind of concern or issues or?
Somewhat. That is a really good question. And it's definitely something that I kind of thought about coming into this arena. I would say my two impressions of the corporate space were that I was worried it would be like a lot more high pressure than state agency or a university, and then I was worried that it would be less stable. At least at Posit, I have found the high pressure one is not true, and the less stable one, we have gone through a round of layoffs since I've been at Posit. So within the last 3 years, I think there was, it was lucky enough it didn't impact my department, and I think probably in general, the stability of positions like this might depend on how you're positioned in the organization. Like I said, I am in the information operations department, which includes IT, security professionals. And so I think kind of just generally speaking, we are seen as infrastructure, I guess, and things that are pretty important to the company, and we managed to do it with a pretty low headcount. And so when we went through those layoffs, my boss's boss, the head of InfoOps, he specifically said that the steering committee, the CEO, and all his top execs, like not even for a second did they look at InfoOps. They said, nope, you guys, you're lean, you have a few number of employees that does a lot of really important work. I won't say that's necessarily always the case. I could see librarians ending up in other departments where maybe that's not the case and they are seen as more expendable. So yeah, I do think that's a valid concern. Luckily, it's not been something I've had to worry about yet so far.
Just something to keep your eyes on and be aware of, and just feel out how your company is handling it, deals with it, and be aware if something might change. Yeah, but I think it happens in any places, sure. Yeah. Question about continuing education. How do you stay engaged with the library environment when not working in a traditional library? How to stay engaged with continuing education? Cool. They say I'm a newer private librarian in a small private cataloging company. So basically, how do you keep up on those kind of things? And they did say afterwards that the Sense Makers Club kind of answered the question, but more, what about continuing education? Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah, that's a really good question, and definitely something that I have ruminated on a lot and tried to figure out how I want to proceed with that. Yeah, the Sense Makers Club is definitely probably my main source. One thing I will say is that my colleague who recruited me for the role before she left, coming from a traditional librarian background, continuing education was very important to her. I think, generally speaking, I would say in the corporate, this is a huge generalization, but generally speaking, I get the sense that perhaps it's not as important in a corporate environment as it is in a traditional role. They don't prioritize professional organization memberships the same way. It's kind of up to you to carve things out. So my colleague did push for me to attend a taxonomy boot camp in Washington, D.C. So I have gone to an in-person conference in kind of this new space, but I feel like it's not necessarily as encouraged as in a traditional environment. So that's why it was kind of cool for me to still get to go to the NLA conference and network with my colleagues from my more traditional librarian days. It's kind of, I don't know, yeah, it's in a weird spot in terms of choosing what to pay attention to. Obviously, the thought has crossed my mind that I'm really glad I don't have to keep up with the latest RDA updates anymore. I don't hope that's not terrible to admit, but
yes, RDA, 4-letter word.
So it's kind of finding that sweet spot of, do I pay attention to traditional library stuff? I sort of feel like with the Sense Makers Club and our corporation recently got a company-wide subscription to Udemy, the online class website, and so I've been doing stuff through there. And so I've kind of made a noticeable pivot towards information architecture and data management and less traditional library stuff, which is a little bit weird, but I think continuing education is important. It still just looks different.
Yeah, just keep your eyes open on things that you would be wanting to do. Yeah. They said ditto to RDA. Yes, laugh. So got a couple other questions here. You did talk about how that you can work whatever hours, but I want to know, how many hours do you end up working in a day? Are yours contiguous, or are you, I know yours may be different because of working with, within people in other parts of the world, but.
Yeah, I stick pretty close to the 40 hours a week. And what I mostly like is that, I can, take 15 minutes to go run and pick my son up from school in the middle of the afternoon and not feel like somebody's nickeling and diming me on my time off. So for the most part, I would say it's contiguous with a couple of breaks for, school drop off and pick up. I'll work a little bit past 5 in the evening, maybe if I'm, close to getting done with a project. But, I know it's nice to know that, like, if something comes up and I need emergency dental work in the middle of a day for 2 hours, I can go and do that. And, I can either, as long as I'm still getting my work done, or if there's something I can say, can you do this for me really quick? Nobody really bats an eye at that. It's real flexibility. And even, about this time last year, I had a family health emergency. One of my parents was in the hospital, and my boss was like, "Yep, take a week off, go to Chicago, be with your family, no big deal." But yeah, on the average, I do stick pretty close to 8 to 5, 40 hours a week, but there's flexibility.
Kind of thing, you set your own hours of work best for you, which is very convenient, definitely.
Exactly.
So someone else is asking, when I worked at home, they had previously, I was resentful to share my home with work. How does that work out for you? Like, being at home, it's home and it's your office. How do you?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. And I think one thing that has helped for me, when I was at Amigos, my previous remote job, just because of where we were in our life in terms of moving homes, my office was in the living room, downstairs on the main living area. I didn't have a door I could shut, anything like that. And I did kind of get that a little bit. I felt that, the boundary, the physical boundary between work and home didn't exist. And so therefore the mental boundary was a little bit more unclear. However, when I started this new job, I'm like, I'm going to move upstairs to our guest bedroom. We only have guests a couple times a year. That's silly. We don't need to save a room for them. I want to have a door that I can close. And so moving to a different level from our main living area, and having a door I can close, honestly, has made a huge difference for me.
This is my workspace. The rest of it is my home space.
Yeah, my commute is going up and downstairs. Yeah.
I know some companies, my husband, he works from home, and they required that he have a office, a separate room with a door that can be shut if they were getting, because also for security for the kind of
Oh,
work
sure, sure.
credit card company, for credit card company. So
Oh, yeah, definitely.
you need to physically be in and have a room. And we did the same thing. We took what was one of our guest rooms and turned it into his office. Said, all right,
Perfect.
there you go. You've got that little room back there that, yeah.
Yeah. And while we're on the subject of working from home, something that just popped into my head is that while I love working from home and wouldn't trade it for the world, I do like that Posit also values occasional in-person interaction. They have a company-wide work week once a year in February, and so we're going to Minneapolis this year. And then each team is also encouraged to have a week where they come into the Boston office and just see their colleagues together. So I feel like these couple times a year in-person interaction does a lot to recharge your battery for the rest of the year working on your own.
Yeah, absolutely. And someone says, I've seen some interesting information about co-working spaces too. Someone is saying, not really available where I'm at, but larger cities also have. I know we have co-working places here in Lincoln even that people use.
Yeah,
if you
definitely.
if you are a remote worker, but you need somewhere to go that does differentiate from your home.
Definitely, yeah. Like I'm in Ashland, so small town, we don't have co-working, but if I was in Lincoln or Omaha, I would probably take advantage of that. And Posit does reimburse co-working expenses too, if that's something you want to do on a regular basis. And they also give us a allowance for home office supplies every year. So if you need, a stand for your laptop or a standing desk or something like that, you can get that on the company dime.
Now that's a question someone asked you. What about your equipment in your office? Do they provide you with the laptop or the furniture or internet connection? Is that generally covered?
Yeah, so to be more specific about that, the laptop is given to you by the company. That comes out. That's the only thing you don't get as much of a choice in, and you would have to send back if you left. But other than that, they just have the home office allowance basically, and so you can choose the desk you want, you can choose the monitors you want. It goes for all the peripherals like a mouse. And we do have what's called a lifestyle spending account, which can be used to reimburse your internet connection if you choose to use it that way.
That's good. Yeah, nice. Yeah, that sounds pretty common. Yeah, they'd have to provide you with something at least to get you.
Yeah, definitely.
Work for them and work for the kind of thing they would normally be in your office that they would have provided. Yeah,
definitely.
Now you said you wouldn't give up the working from remote work at all, but an interesting question did just come in. Is there anything at all you do miss about a traditional work environment?
Ooh, that is an excellent question. I mean, somewhat, like I said, I think having the couple times a year in person for me fills up my cup enough on in person to person interaction. I think
with your colleagues.
Yeah, some people I think would really miss that. There's no water cooler talk, going to the break room for coffee type of thing. The way my personality is, it doesn't bother me that much. Honestly, when my husband complains about, oh, somebody came in and just wanted to do small talk for like half an hour and I couldn't stop him from talking, I'm like, I don't have to worry about that. But it's personal preference. Some people really thrive on that socialization. Anything I miss? Yeah, that's probably it. The occasional social interaction, but I appreciate mostly having it on my terms. You can call up somebody for a Zoom call. One thing we've kicked around that we haven't done yet on my team is just having like an open work hour where we all log onto a Zoom and everybody's doing their own work, but you can talk to colleagues or something like that too. And so that was an idea that came out of our most recent work week at the Boston office, and that's reminding me, I should maybe follow up with my boss and see if that's actually going to happen.
Yeah. My husband's work, they do get-togethers. They used to do them in person pre-COVID, but now they do them remotely online altogether. They actually never have any in-person things that the company provides for them if they want to get together on their own, if they happen to live nearby.
Sure.
Yeah. But so they will have like a half a day that will be, we're having this, it's a more social event type thing where we're just hanging out and chatting, and sometimes there's activities. At one time there was a scavenger hunt, and it was when we were both working at home for COVID, and he was running around the house and I'm like, what are you doing? I'm trying to do my work, and he's like, do we have a whatever? I'm like,
that's awesome.
Hunt. I gotta find the thing. Oh my god! So you can get social things done this way
Yeah, we have had some, I think,
So they
like
do that a
company-wide.
couple of times a year. They have these
That's
little
fun.
where they have
That's
their
cool.
get together is remotely, because they are all over the place now. Yeah, they're not
Very cool.
all together in the same city or anything. So on his team, yeah. So
Nice. Yeah, we have had like company-wide bingo events where they hire like an online bingo company where they give you a link to a
yeah,
bingo card and you all keep up
yeah.
together. And so that was things like that were kind of fun. This week we're having, just my department is having an online white elephant gift exchange. I'm not quite sure how it's going to work. They said all the gifts are provided by the company, but it's going to still have the, Yankee swap, you can steal it type of thing. So, and then you receive your
Interesting.
gift in the mail afterwards. So I'll see how that goes.
I wonder how that would be done online. Yeah, okay.
I'll report back.
Okay. Another question here, which I think is more of a personal one of someone who knows you. What about getting another coworker? When are you going to get another cat? Your
Okay,
cats, your dogs, or your coworkers that you have to
I
deal
have a feeling that maybe Sarah, my colleague who recruited me for this position, and who is also a cat person and knows that 2 months before I started my job at Posit, our 19-year-old cat passed away.
with.
We do not have a new coworker yet, but I'm wearing down the husband. I think he's getting close. His latest excuse is after the holidays. We can't, we're going to go to Chicago for Christmas. We can't get him yet. So
Of
still
course
working on
not.
that.
And I would think your son would maybe be wanting something.
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
It's usually,
Great
sometimes
question.
that's where it comes from. Yeah.
Yeah, we can't deprive our kid of a pet.
All right. We're almost getting close to 11 o'clock. Anybody, I don't see any other questions I haven't grabbed yet. Does anybody have any other questions you want to ask of Emily about working, remote work, corporate work, pet suggestions?
Cat names.
Yeah. Thanks. Very interesting. Mo from here from Nebraska says hi, Emily.
Oh, nice. Hello.
Uh, um, she wants to know when she gets okay. And so some of our library commission staff are together watching in one of our other meeting rooms today, and they want to know they say to let you know that the library commission wants to know when you get another cat. So we'll keep
okay, I will make sure that it is communicated. I will tell.
Yeah. Everyone shares about their pets and stuff, and yeah, your cat was always on your social media.
That's right. Yes. Okay,
And
I will
a
tell.
cat for 19 years. That's a good long life for a cat. I've had
Oh,
cats
yeah.
from 1920, and it's yeah.
Yeah.
So.
But yeah, if anybody has questions after the fact, there's my Gmail address, and connect with me on LinkedIn if you'd like to.
Awesome. All right, more thank yous coming in. All right, doesn't look like we have any
Awesome.
more desperate questions, so I think I'm gonna wrap up. So very helpful and informative session.
Nice.
I'm gonna bring up my screen. Here, it should be doing its thing. There we go. All right. So yes, thank you so much, Emily. So good to see you again.
Yeah, good to see you too.
Ish. Yeah.
I know it feels weird not to be sitting next to you doing this thing.
I know. Her almost was right next door to me. Yeah, when she was. Literally, yeah. So this is great. It's so cool to hear about what you've been doing. I know I've seen you jumping around from jobs and everything. Not jumping on, that sounds bad, but
no, but I get it. Yeah.
Doing new and interesting things. So very cool to hear all about it.
Awesome.
And very interesting. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
So, yeah, so it'd be great. Interesting to hear about being a corporate librarian. So maybe some people might start getting into it now, looking into the
there we go.
Yeah, looking to it. All right. So today's show is being recorded and will be available on our NCompass Live page by the end of the day tomorrow. If you use your search engine of choice and look up NCompass Live, you'll come to our main page. You'll get our archive page. Here's our upcoming shows, and then our archive link is right here. Most recent shows are at the top of the page. So today's will be here, and Emily's already sent me a link to her slides, so her slides will be available as well. So you'll have all of that as well. Everyone who attended today's show and registered for today's show get an email from me letting you know when the recording is ready. We also push it out onto we have email lists here in Nebraska, and we push it out onto our social media. We have a Facebook page for NCompass Live. If you like to use Facebook, give us a like. Here we do reminders. Here's a reminder to log into today's show, and announcing new shows. And then when the recordings are available, we post on here as well. We also use the Library Commission's Twitter account and Instagram. We have Twitter and Instagram, and we use the hashtag NCompLive, a little abbreviation for our show name, if you're looking for anything just about the show that's posted out there. Push out there too. Here on our show archives, you can search, see if we've got a topic on anything you might be interested in. You can search the full show archives or just the most recent 12 months if you want something really current. That is because this is our full show archives going back, and I'm not going to scroll all the way down because it's a huge list, but going back to when the show first premiered, which was in January 2009, which is 16 years of shows, if I've got my math right.
Wow.
Yeah. So I can't remember. Did you do NCompass Lives for us? Let's see.
Oh, I think so. Yeah.
There we go. I bet you this is Make Your Cataloging Work, Life After Mark. See.
Oh yeah.
I want to see when Emily was a baby presenter, baby librarian.
I think it was on the very first time we used GoToMeeting, because whatever we were using before crapped out on us a couple days beforehand or something.
A different product for the first 6 months of the show, and then that went away, and we took a break of a couple of months and had to find something new, and finally came up with discovered GoToWebinar and been with them ever since. But so you can watch these old shows if you want to, but do pay attention, as you can see here, to the original broadcast dates. Some things you can always see when a show first happened. Some things we find to watch stand the test of time, really be good resources. Look, here's that RDA. But some things will become old and outdated information. Things have changed drastically. Links might not work. Companies or whatever might not exist anymore. People will be at different libraries, different jobs than when they presented for us. So just do pay attention to any of our when you're watching something old. But as we do, librarians keep things for historical purposes. As long as we will always keep doing this, as long as we have somewhere to keep all of our show archives. And right now, it is all on the Nebraska Library Commission's YouTube channel. All right, so that wraps up today. We've got our upcoming shows listed here. Do be aware we're taking a couple weeks off at the end of December, beginning January. Our shows on Wednesdays, this December 25th and January 1st are both federal and for us state holidays because we're a state library. So we're officially closed on those days, and I've decided to just take those 2 weeks off. So no show December 25th or January 1st. We're back on January 8th. But we've got all our December shows here and January ones on here. So next week we are talking about what were the best new children's books of 2024, as determined by our coordinator of Children and Young Adult Library Services, Sally Snyder. This is her annual show that she does, talking about cool books that she saw, children's books. So this is preschool through elementary school. And if you notice, we also have her best new teen reads coming up on January 8th. So this would be for the middle and high school levels, the companion show to her children's book ones. So please do sign up for those and keep your eyes open for more dates coming in more shows being confirmed for 2025. All right, so thank you so much again, Emily.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you everyone for being here, and hopefully we'll see you all on a future episode of NCompass Live. Bye-bye.